to the northeast is keeping Ernesto out in the Atlantic, but the energy means showers and storms. Your not so stellar weekend forecast just ahead. Reynolds.
Plus, kids, baby.
In the Midwest, we've had reports of hail. We've had reports of some damaging winds into New England, also some messy weather as well. But it's really our system moving through the Midwest that will eventually get into the Northeast, and that is what keeps our storm out to sea and also gives us the really unsettled weather. So through tomorrow, there is a threat for flooding stretching all the way down here into the Gulf Coast states. So showers are certainly a possibility, and you can see the pieces of energy. There's just like this huge ball of energy, and this is all going to be sliding east. And here is Ernesto. By the way, that's Bermuda right there. You can see that little island. Let's see if I can get it for you. There's Bermuda. So what's going to happen is as this passes Bermuda, this is our first trough. There's a lot going on here. This is why we love the water vapor. Okay, so here's our first trough. That's what gave us that bad weather in New England yesterday. That is what's pulling Ernesto up. So it's still interacting with that trough. This is our second piece of energy. That's going to swing east, and it's going to block Ernesto from coming into the lower 48. But that second trough does mean that we're going to see some storms. We already have flash flood warnings here into Missouri. Heavy rain also passing into Michigan, Indiana, and down into Kentucky as well. The Boot Hill getting in on some of those showers here in Missouri, and this is all just going to slowly continue to pivot eastbound for us. We do have a much more available energy back into the Midwest versus as we look here along the East Coast. So let's watch it all play out hour by hour as we go through the day. Showers and storms make their way east, but don't forget you still have that upper level energy. Look at it still spinning. You can't sleep until that has passed. That is going to be making its way eastbound and still kicking off those showers and storms for us as we head through the entire weekend. So this is a slow moving really kind of into our Monday, as a matter of fact. Here's some of those stronger boomers on the north side of Nashville up towards Portland. They're on the border with Kentucky. We really get a smattering of storms as we head around 4 o'clock hour, which is dinner time for some of us. And then as we head into the real dinner time for people, we'll see a few more scattered storms. It does clear out into the evening hours, which is nice, so you can sleep soundly. How about Pittsburgh? I always think of Brett Michaels, Pittsburgh boy. Scattered showers coming in for our Friday. Heavier rain even into the evening hours. It does continue. And we will see some pops of thunder and lightning too, Reynolds, as we head into our Saturday.
All right.
Way quickly, though, Sunday conditions will improve dramatically and at an exponential rate. So let's talk about the impacts to the U.S. Now, here's the thing. Ernesto is being held at bay from a trough that we're going to have coming in. The one that I was showing you in the Midwest, that trough is going to keep Ernesto offshore, off the East Coast. But obviously, the winds are going to propagate waves out along much of the East Coast here. And then you have the king tide on top of that. What is the king tide? The king tide is when you have a full or a new moon, and that just makes the tides higher even if you have no weather happening whatsoever. It has to do totally with the moon and not with the weather. So with the king tide, which is going to be higher than your normal tide cycle, and the waves on top of that, we could have problems here along the East Coast. But what I want to mention is that not only the waves pounding at the shore and that higher tide, even where you have lower rip currents, you still have to be careful around those jetties and the piers because you can still get rip currents there. We do have high rip currents here along much of the East Coast, even in the Gulf of Mexico. But of course, our waves are going to be increasing from 7 to 10 feet. It's going to peak on Friday, last through the weekend as well, as the system basically goes all the way up the East Coast. It's going to impact Bermuda really Saturday. Excuse me, I was trying to stop that whole time. I was concentrating hard. I couldn't make it happen. But notice the waves still are propagating out on the south side of the system. So it's not like once it passes, you're done and done. So today we have that high rip current here into Long Island, even low in New England. But remember, those jetties and piers, I can't emphasize that enough. We do have that rip current risk. It peaks on Sunday for us here into the Northeast, and it lasts into our Monday. So this is going to be a long-lasting storm for us, and we are going to see it all weekend long. And unfortunately, 29 of the 30 surf zone deaths we've had this year have been to rip current. So stay out of the water. Reynolds, it's so hot in the south. A lot of people are heading to the beaches in the south. Now, the Gulf of Mexico, not necessarily influenced dramatically by this, but you still have to watch it in the water.
Absolutely. And I don't know.
Island sitting in this huge Atlantic Ocean, but where it's situated and where storms typically travel, they get hit. It's crazy. So it's a group of islands that is 24 miles long. Hamilton is the capital, and they have a population of 64,000. 1,000 people. But it looks like a fish hook. Did you see the way that was shaped? So it's known as the fish hook shaped island. If we look back in time, Hurricane Igor, we just brushed it. The center went off to the west, but even though the center goes off to the west, obviously you're still impacted. Hurricane Faye there, essentially making landfall on the northeast side of the island there in 2014. And as we look at Hurricane Gonzalo in 2014, just going right over the island as a very strong hurricane. And then Nicole in 2016 also going over the island here as a hurricane, as a Category 3. So they have had intense storms over the years. Umberto has gone to the north of it, but you're still impacted by the waves. Look at Paulette 2020. I just think it's crazy that so many storms have gone right over Bermuda when it's this little island in just such a huge ocean. This one could go right over it too, or we could stay in the eye wall, which would be the worst case scenario. Hurricane warnings are up. And let's look at the timing of this. So today conditions will go downhill, but it's really Saturday when you feel the impacts of it. There's Bermuda. Do we stay in this eye wall, this western eye wall the whole time? Do we get a break in the eye? These are going to wibble and wobble, so it's hard to say exactly right now, but it could be a worst case scenario and we just stay in that northern then western eye wall. Sunday, look at that. We improve dramatically and quickly once that storm passes for us here. And there's your timing into tonight, really kind of overnight, but Saturday, Jordan, will be the day, the most intense day.
Oh, yeah, if you can prep now, you still have a...
Welcome back into America's Morning Headquarters. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jordan Steele and Reynolds Wolf. Smoke from the Canadian wildfires is filtering down over the northeast. You can see how thick it is over the past 24 hours. And look at what Wednesday was like in New York City with those hazy skies, moderate air quality indices into the end of next week, into the end of the week with really no end in sight for the fires burning here, but our air quality will improve because we are going to get rain that's going to come in. And so that should help some of this poor air quality throughout the day here into the Northeast and in New England. But just looking at that, Jordan, I'm like...
Dude, that brings in haunting memories of just last year.
Ugh, remember how orange the sky was? Not even in the peak yet, right? As we had late August, early September, September 10th, 11th, 12th, that's really when it peaks out. Now, even though the storm is going to stay offshore, it's already producing rip currents along the East Coast. Even where it's low in New England, be careful around those jetties and piers. You can still get rip currents. And by the way, this is going to be an all-weekend event, and we will see those higher rip currents make its way into New England as we head into the second half of the weekend. So we're not out of it. Coastal impacts, we peak out with that highest rip current here in the southeast coast. 7 to 10 foot waves, so it's going to be pretty rough out there. And then notice the Northeast and New England, we peak on Sunday. This is going to last into Monday as well with that rip current risk. So it is going to get worse before it gets better. We are going to see a lot of double red flags, I can tell you, flying out there. Do not go in the water. I'd even be cautious when there's a yellow flag. It can still rough you up. Water can be just so intense. So let's have a look at the rip current areas and different sandbars. So you see how we have kind of like waves here of water going along the beach. You have to watch it around sandbars and jetties because the way that the water interacts with those, the water gets pulled back out in a rip current. And so that's what you have to keep mind of. So you always want to swim near a lifeguard, assume there's always a rip current. If you're caught, you stay calm, you float out parallel to the shore and then back in, and always call for help if you need it. And look at our surf zone deaths so far in 2024. Majority of them have been into Florida. And as we look at the top weather-related deaths, rip currents is 69 on our list. Well, it's third on our list with 69 people on average. That's a lot of people. And this is something that's totally avoidable. You just have to stay out of the water. Of course, heat is the #1 killer. Reynolds.
All right, Steph, thanks so much.
Because of our first entity, and then here in the Midwest with our second entity, we have troughs #1 and 2 that have been impacting us here. And #2 is going to be the big player as we head over the next couple of days, including today, where we have that threat for some thunderstorms from the Midwest all the way back into the plains, as a matter of fact. And everything's going to be shifting east into tomorrow with that possibility of flooding. So here we have trough #1. Notice also the dry air that we have on the west side side, this is Ernesto, there's Bermuda. Look at all the dry air on that west side of Ernesto, not helping it. And also with that big dip here, you know, how it's interacting with that jet stream, also giving it a little bit of trouble there. And we are also seeing this is system number 2 causing all the storms, and that will help keep Ernesto offshore. Interesting note about this jet stream, depending on where it is situated in relation to Ernesto, it can help or hurt it. And so keep that in mind. But let's focus in on number 2, because that's where we are seeing the storms right now from Indiana, Michigan, back towards Missouri, where we have flash flood warnings from storms that have passed through. And remember the video we were just showing you, you're going to get those heavier downpours, you get some localized flash flooding, and then that's going to move on through. So showers and thunderstorms. Notice also the dry air that we have on the west side. This is Ernesto, there's Bermuda. Look at all the dry air on that west side of Ernesto, not helping it. And also with that big dip here, you know, how it's interacting with that jet stream, also giving it a little bit of trouble there. And we are also seeing this is system number 2 causing all the storms, and that will help keep Ernesto offshore. Interesting note about this jet stream, depending on where it is situated in relation to Ernesto, it can help or hurt it. And so keep that in mind. But let's focus in on number 2, because that's where we are seeing the storms right now from Indiana, Michigan, back towards Missouri, where we have flash flood warnings from storms that have passed through. And remember the video we were just showing you, you're going to get those heavier downpours, you get some localized flash flooding, and then that's going to move on through. So showers and thunderstorms, they'll be robust, not only this morning, but as we head into the afternoon hours as well. And that daytime heating, of course, will help us out. Detroit, cloud cover for you, some rain pushing through. And you're thinking, okay, we're done. No, we still have to wait for that upper level energy here to rotate through. That's going to continue to keep us unsettled, and then of course the surface boundaries too as well, and then it's all eventually going to be making its way east. How about Nashville? Starting off the day, we're dry, but as we go through the afternoon, when the kids are coming home from school, I believe Nashville's back in school, we will see those showers and thunderstorms pop up. The same as we head around kind of that snack hour, though I know kids ask for snacks like every hour on the hour. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a latchkey kid, so I didn't have to ask. I could just didn't have to. Oh, they went back on the 6th in Nashville. Pittsburgh, you're seeing on and off showers. You will see the cloud cover today. Some of those heavier downpours as we head around dinner time. Though sometimes on Friday, dinner's a little bit later, right? You kind of push it a little bit, push that bedtime back a bit. And into Springfield, Missouri here, I-44. We are going to be dry to start the day, but look at this afternoon. This is the kind of thing, Reynolds, where you're driving along 44, you can see the darker clouds ahead of you, and all of a sudden it's like, whoosh, and then you pop out of it and you're good to go. This is a drop your bagel moment, as I say sometimes. Is this not? Yes! Wow. This is live.
Beautiful.
Absolutely stunning here on the Florida coast, just north of St. Augustine at Villano Beach. And the coast is going to see some bigger waves here from Ernesto, of course, and rip currents as well. But you could just stay out of the water, sit on the beach, and look at this beautiful sun that we're seeing coming up here. All right, let's talk about the impacts from Ernesto. It's not just Florida. We are going to see those rip currents all along the East Coast. This big baddie of a storm is headed towards Bermuda and just pushing out swells here along the East Coast. And it's not just that. We also are going to have king tides. We have a full moon on August 19th. So, you know, those days leading up to it, it's a pretty full moon, but technically full on August 19th. And what that does is it gives you higher than normal tides, and that's regardless of a storm. So even if there was no storm out here, we would still have those higher tides because of the moon, but we're now combining the king tide with Ernesto's waves, and that just obviously exacerbates the situation here along the East Coast. Now, it could be a low that's close to the coast. It could be a low that's away from the coast. Again, it doesn't even matter. Even without all of that, we would still have those higher tides. So wave heights, they are kicking off. This is this morning along the East Coast, and we are going to see those rip currents that will be on the high side, even where it's moderate and even where it's low here on the west coast of Florida, which is not directly impacted by, you know, these waves coming from Ernesto. You got to be careful around those jetties and piers because you can still get the rip currents to develop. So here are the coastal impacts. Friday, we're peaking out in the southeast with our waves 7 to 10 feet. And remember, there could be a little erosion with this and just some really rough surf. As we go through the weekend and Ernesto moves north, the waves are going to move north with that as well. We'll clear out here into the southeast, and things will get worse and go downhill from the mid-Atlantic into New England. So our rip currents today, we do have some that are high there along Long Island, but that will change as we go into our Sunday, as we have a high risk of rip currents with those waves 7 to 10 feet. And notice they start coming up, and you'll feel the impacts of it today, but it will get worse as we head into the weekend, especially on Sunday. That's when we will feel the worst conditions, even into Monday. And usually there's a little lag with the waves going away. The storm goes away, and the water just kind of lags a bit with that energy. Watch for those red flags. We've got them, I'm sure, posted up and down the coast. Reynolds, stay out of the water. Welcome back into America's Morning Headquarters. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams alongside meteorologist Jordan Steele and Reynolds Wolf. We want to talk about the smoke from the Canadian wildfires. It's filtering down into the Northeast. Places like New York City seeing hazy skies and moderate air quality. And I'll tell you what, it's not looking great out there this morning. You can see that haze in the sky, and notice all the smoke over the last 24 hours is burning here in Canada's forest, as it was last year. And by the way, it's not going to get much better through tonight. There's your poor air quality. And notice that we do have orange, which is unhealthy for sensitive groups here throughout upstate New York. Otherwise, there's a lot of just moderate poor air quality. So even if you don't have any asthma or some underlying condition, Jordan, you still really should probably not run outside and breathe all this in. Take a lot of frequent breaks. Look at that.
Man, that's not what you want on a Friday.
No, but there's rain coming in.
There is rain coming.
It's all about the heat, and it has been intense. There's no dimmer on this thing. I mean, there's no switch. There's no switch whatsoever. It's like it's just jammed on, and it's not moving anywhere because it lasts through the weekend into next week. We still have excessive heat warnings. I know a lot of places it's been a little bit more moderated when we talk about our temperatures, but the southern plains into the southeast, it's been hot. It's been humid. Though a little bit of that drier air, you can feel it getting into the Carolinas and into Georgia, but still dew point temperatures well into the 70s here from Corpus up to Dallas. So the 102, 103, it's going to feel a lot hotter than that. You're talking 110, even maybe 115 for some. Look at Little Rock at 114. It's just brutal out there, and it is extensive. Look at Little Rock, how we start off the day in the 80s and 90s even. And by 7 p.m., I know the sun is actually setting a little bit sooner, which I'm loving because, you know, those of us, and you can relate if you do shift work, you have to go to bed earlier at a weird hour. It's so much nicer when it's not blazing still at 8 o'clock at night. But the temperatures are still blazing at 8 o'clock at night. Even once the sun sets, we don't have time really to cool off. Sunday, more of that heat is going to linger here. Our heat index into the 1-teens yet again, all the way into Tallahassee. 104 is what it's going to feel like. And Florida has been hot. Look at Key West, 103, which you think is like, great, it's Florida, it's supposed to be hot. But oof, it can wear you out. I was born and raised there, grew up, and what's funny is your body just changes as you age, A, and B, when you're away from that heat for a long time, you go back to it and chokes me up. But look at Saturday. We do have some cooler air getting into Ocala, 69 for a low tomorrow morning, and temperatures much more moderate for us here. I mean, the 90s are still there, but at least not the triple digits. Look at Sunday morning even. You're really, get out early. Do your run early. You'll enjoy that weather. Now, as kids head back to school, the heat is on, and it could impact your time inside and outside the classroom. Coming up at 8:40, we'll find out how the marching bands are adjusting to extreme heat and making sure they stay ready to hit the field. Jordan, you grew up in San Diego with like the perfect weather.
Yeah.
Or is it now cold when you go back to San Diego when it's like 72?
Yeah, it can be, especially if you have a
huge monster wind maker. It just pumps out these ripples on the water, and that gives us waves, and we do have a rip current here along the East Coast. It is high in a lot of beaches, moderate and even low in the Northeast in New England, but that will switch to high as the system travels farther northbound. But by the way, even where it's low and we're not feeling the super direct impacts from this here along the west coast of Florida, you have to be careful around those jetties, around those piers. You can still get rip current even when it is forecast to be low. So highest risk here on the southeast coast Friday, but it's going to last through the weekend. Waves 7 to 10 feet. And the same as we go into the Northeast, where we peak out on Sunday. And this is going to last into Monday, because even though the system exits, it still is propagating those waves out on the south side. Here's a look at the flags. We are going to see a lot of double red flags, I'm sure, at the beaches. And then watch out for the rip currents. You see, listen, they're hard to spot. I've been to literally the beach, as a lot of us have, a gazillion times. I've never actually seen a rip current myself. So I would go to the lifeguard and maybe they'll point them out for you. But it's where you see this darker, that's your rip current right there. So where the water kind of comes up like that, you see the rip current being pulled back. So that's where it is, that darker water right there. So watch for scallops like this on the beach, and where you see it bump up like that, there could be a rip current. I don't know. I would just say go to a lifeguard because, I'm born and raised in Florida. I've never seen one with my own eyes. It's just too hard. Reynolds, if you're caught in one, make sure you stay calm and float, or you can always yell for help. That's what the lifeguards are there for. Swim by them.
Great advice, no doubt.
Luckily, energy moving into the northeast is going to keep Ernesto in the Atlantic, but that energy means showers and storms. Your not-so-stellar weekend forecast here in the northeast is ahead. Reynolds.
And in the name of all
that possibility of some flooding in the south. So here is the first trough. You see that spin. And I also wanted to point out, there's Ernesto, by the way, and there's Bermuda. The center of Ernesto is down there. This dry air is one of the reasons that you see Ernesto quite lopsided. And we also have this trough coming around, so that's going to blow everything, off to the north and east like that. So that's going to impact Ernesto. One thing is, though, if the hurricane can set up perfectly with a jet max, the strongest winds here, then it can help actually grow the storm. We'll talk about that a lot later, but I just thought that was interesting to see. Back to the regularly scheduled program, 1 and 2. And notice that this has multiple little spins in it in the overall troughiness area. So that is going to bring us the weather for quite some time. And I'm talking about today, tomorrow, even into our Monday as it moves east. Dew point temperature sitting right around 70, so it's a bit muggy out there. And the weather is acting quite muggy as well. As it's rolling through Cincinnati, in and out Indianapolis, you're getting some more storms. Louisville, you'll get in on this action. And a lot of the forcing in the atmosphere is back into the Midwest and the plains. This is all going to be progressing east. So Detroit, you get it. Cleveland, you'll get clouds, maybe a stray shower. But notice, even as we head into the evening hours, the upper level energy still associated with this is back into the upper Midwest, and that takes a while to rotate through. But it's all eventually going to get into the Northeast for our Sunday and our Monday. Nashville, we're starting out dry unless you live north of the suburbs here, well north of the suburbs on 65 or 24. More storms fire up this afternoon for places like Portland. And then as we head into that 4 o'clock snack time hour, when the kids are begging you for snacks, that's when we'll see some storms there. And otherwise, into Pittsburgh, always give a shout out to Brett Michaels, who's such a big weather lover from this area. On and off showers for us today. And because we're a little bit farther north, we're going to still kind of see it a little more consistent as we head throughout our Saturday. And then, of course, we'll get more as we head into our Sunday and Monday. Reynolds, I-44, you're going to run into those darker clouds ahead of you where you can maybe even see the rain coming out, seeing a rain shaft. You might be able to see a rain shaft in some of these. It'll be kind of cool if you do.
Could have.
Stuck in that eye wall for an extended period of time. All right, Florida, now you're just showing off. Have a look at the coast of the area, coast of Florida, just north of St. Augustine. And we are going to see these waves kick up from Ernesto. And there is a rip current risk here until Sunday. So keep that in mind. But just beautiful start to the day here. It's been hot in Florida, I will tell you that. It's been quite warm. We do get a little bit of a cool off, which I'm going to detail a little bit later in the show. Yes, our overnight lows into the upper 60s, low 70s for a lot of you. We'll have that in just a minute. But first, we've got to talk about all of the wind energy from this massive hurricane, and that is basically pumping out the waves in all directions, by the way. But of course, we are going to see it here not only along the East Coast because of the wind, but we also have king tide. King tide is when you got a new or a full moon, and that makes your tides a little bit higher. And you don't even need any other system. Just because you have the bigger moon phase, you get those higher tides. But if you combine it with a storm, whether it's just a little low pressure or a hurricane, that's when it really exacerbates the situation at the coast. So waves have already started to kick up for us here, and notice they are going to get stronger. Rip current forecast along the East Coast is high, even where it's low here on the west coast of Florida. I would still be careful because you can get rip currents along jetties and piers, but 7 to 10 foot waves here along the East Coast, it just roughs everything up. It's peaking today, but it will last through the weekend. And notice as this goes north, and it takes time for them to pump out these waves, it's going to continue. And by the way, it takes a minute for the waves to go back. and just kind of relax and go back to normal. So everything just is a little bit slower with this wave energy coming from the storms. Today in the Northeast, high and moderate, but as we go into our Sunday and Monday, that's when we're going to see a high rip current risk for us here. Again, 7 to 10 foot waves. Notice that they are going to be coming up through Friday and Saturday, but they really max out for the second half of the weekend. We're going to have rain here the second half of the weekend, so I'm hoping that can save some lives because we've already lost over 20 lives to rip currents this year. So if you see double red flag, if you see a single flag, Reynolds, if you see a yellow flag, even then I would still be careful about getting in the water.
Absolutely. That's good.
Island, that's how it's described because it looks like a fish hook here. It is a group of islands that's 24 miles long. Hamilton's the capital. Population's just over 64,000 people. If we go back in time, their worst hurricane that they got in 50 years was Fabian in 2003. That was a Cat 3. They were in the eye wall. They had major damage. Then we go to Igor, and that's when you were there, Reynolds, right?
Yes.
For Igor, what was it like in Igor?
Igor started off as when it left the airport, and I was working in a different place. Cantori was on the flight with me going over. It was a Cat 5, and then by the time we landed there, the air had gone out of the balloon.
Well, that's good. So they didn't have too much damage from that. But then in 2014, we had back-to-back storms. First, we had Hurricane Faye, $3.8 million in damage, due in part to its surprise arrival. It was followed only 6 days later by Category 2 Gonzalo, which caused $200 million in damage. So those were back-to-back, not great for Bermuda. Then we had Nicole in 2016. This was the first major direct impact to Bermuda since Fabian in 2003, and equally one of the strongest and most impactful. You can see major hurricanes at Cat 3 or higher. Then there was Umberto that was kind of a while away from it. And then Paulette came in here, Cat 1, Cat 2 over the islands for us. And then Hurricane Lee, which is a little bit ways away, but still a Cat 3, so you're going to get some of the periphery from that. Hurricane warning in effect for all of the islands. Let's watch this system come up. As we go into the afternoon, we'll get some more rain, but really the impacts start as we head overnight tonight. Look at that in the northern eye wall-ish. I mean, the eye wall is probably closer there, but you're getting some of the worst of the weather. My issue is if this stays on its path north and we just stay on this western side of it the whole time, getting hammered. Sunday, by the way, it moves out quickly, and we will see improving conditions very fast on our Sunday for us. But we start things really late tonight into tomorrow. It stays nasty all day on Saturday. Winds perhaps as high as 92 miles an hour. This could be in that Cat 1, Cat 2 range as it is affecting us here in Bermuda. Jordan.
Well, there's still...
Me and Alex Wallace are here, America's Morning Headquarters. America's Morning Headquarters.
Say that 3 times fast, right?
It was quarters and covered, trying to stay together there. I'll just let Alex take it away. You guys, what do you have coming up at 9?
Lots to track here for us as we head through.
I don't think people realize also how large Alaska is.
Massive.
It is massive.
It's
have you
like
ever
the
been?
size of the Earth. I'm joking, but you know what I'm saying. It is big.
Have you been before?
Yes, took a cruise out there. Chef's kiss.
The mountains are just next level, literally there.
Mid-August, many kids across the country headed back to the classroom, and that means after-school activities are forced to fight the sizzling summer heat.
And for those headed to marching band practice, large instruments, long hours, and thick uniforms can make for especially dangerous conditions. Matt Kozak, president of the Arizona Marching Band Association and director of bands at Campo Verde High School, joins us now. Matt, of course, Arizona, I mean, we're talking heat there, triple digits, right? Are there regulations regarding outdoor practice?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to be very careful with
On what your students and band directors can do to maybe modify practice and combat some of the heat?
Yeah, I would just say
Summertime, but it does get cold still during the football season for a lot, especially those northern states. Are there rules and regulations when it's too cold, or their uniforms, and do instruments ever kind of freeze up in the weather?
Good question.
I
Big money when it comes to football. Are there any indoor high school stadiums in Arizona? Good info, nonetheless, because I know a lot of folks, when you think of outdoor practice, you think outdoor sports. But I mean, this
is a sport.
This is a sport for sure.
Sorry, Matt Kozak, president of the Arizona Marching Band Association and director of bands at Campo Verde High School. Thanks for joining us.
We appreciate it.
But it's a sport. They're out there marching. The instruments are heavy. Reynolds, they weigh a lot, those instruments.
Yes, they do.
As the wind kicks up the surf and everything propagates out in all directions, by the way. So even once the storm has passed, it is still pumping those waves down towards the island. So you're still going to have rip current issues there. We see them up and down the entire East Coast, not only today, but through the entire weekend. The worst in the southeast. This peaks Friday. It's going to last through the weekend with our waves 7 to 10 feet, as Jordan was mentioning. And then into the northeast, we really peak out on Sunday with that rip current. But on Sunday, we're also going to have clouds and rain. So I'm hoping this just keeps people out of the water and not in the water. If you see, of course, red flag, you know red means no, green means go, yellow, swim near lifeguard. I'm telling you, it still can be quite rough out there, even when it's yellow. It will surprise you. Where do you look for the rip current? So you have these scallops, if you will, on the beach, these bumps, and you see this dark area of what that is your rip current. So the water comes up and then it goes out. So listen, I was talking to Jordan, who's a surfer. I was born and raised in Florida. I've never been able to spot a rip current. So I say go to the lifeguard. Maybe they can point them out for you or tell you where it's safe in the water there. Always swim near a lifeguard. Assume the rips are always present. If you're caught, you want to float. I say yell for help, and then when you can, swim parallel to the shore out of that rip and then back in. Of the 29 deaths, out of the 30 deaths, I should say, we've had in surf zones this year, 29 have been due to rip currents, majority of those in Florida. And notice that rip currents are actually third in the last 10 years when we talk about weather-related killers, only behind heat and flooding, which of course we see so much of, and then you go down the list with winds and tornadoes, Reynolds.
Okay, Steph.